I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network, and this is a breaking news alert. We are learning that one of Donald Trump's lawyers, Evan Corcoran, has now testified before the criminal grand jury that is impaneled in Washington, D.C., which is investigating Donald Trump's theft of the thousands of government records, including classified records, top secret, as well as sensitive compartmented information. This is one of the two major criminal investigations that Special Counsel Jack Smith is leading, and Evan Corcoran's testimony here is pivotal. Again, it shows that Special Counsel Jack Smith is continuing to pursue a very aggressive criminal investigation of Donald Trump. And Corcoran, as Trump's lawyer, though, was inextricably intertwined in Donald Trump's theft, concealment, and obstruction of justice of these government records that Donald Trump stole. First, Evan Corcoran was and is still the main lawyer for Donald Trump that has been dealing with communications with the government regarding Donald Trump's theft of these records. Specifically, even going back to late 2021 and 2022, specifically in January of 2022. Remember when Donald Trump gave back the National Archives like 15 boxes, and then it turned out that intermingled within the newspaper clippings and other things, like Donald Trump there was like 200 classified records there, including sensitive compartmented information there. Well, Evan Corcoran was responsible for working with the National Archives and the Department of Justice in and around that time. And one of the things that the FBI was focused on is they were like, it seems this Evan Corcoran, this lawyer for Trump, is just completely lying to us. Evan Corcoran continued to work with Donald Trump and communicate with the archives. And then when the referral was made, of course, to the Department of Justice throughout 2022, Evan Corcoran was the one who really was tasked as the lead lawyer to respond to the grand jury subpoena from the criminal grand jury in Washington, D.C. to return the classified records, to return all of the government records. That was sent out in May of 2022. And what you may recall is that the Department of Justice top counterintelligence officials then arranged a meeting. The meeting was arranged with Evan Corcoran. Christina Bobb was ultimately there as well, who's one of Trump's lawyers, although in this specific situation, she claims that she wasn't acting as his lawyer, but his custodian of records, which doesn't really make any sense to me, but very little in Trump world makes sense to me. But in response to this May subpoena, Corcoran, Bobb, they didn't file any objections. They didn't assert, any privileges at the time. What they did was they returned a red weld folder. Those are those legal folders, met with a Department of Justice official, and in that was more classified records. And Christina Bobb signed an attestation, and she said that after a diligent search was conducted, these are all of the records that exist. There are no more government records at all at Mar-a-Lago or anywhere on any of Trump's properties. She said that, again, a diligent search had been done. She said it's all in this red weld folder, so there's nothing else to see here. Returned it over to the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice then realized that that was a lie. One of the things we've learned as well, though, from Christina Bobb, she wanted to include language in her attestation to the Department of Justice and to the FBI that it was based upon information told to her. She wanted to add that language because the attestation originally said, based on a diligent search of the property, here are all of the records that we've been able to locate. No other records exist. She never actually searched the residence. So she wanted language in there that said, based on what was told to me. So who told that to her? Evan Corcoran. So on behalf of Donald Trump, Evan Corcoran forced it's probably not all that hard to force Christina Bobb to sell her soul to Donald Trump and implicate herself in serious criminal conspiracies hurting our national security for Donald Trump based on her cult-like weird fascist devotion to him. But she got that request from Evan Corcoran. Hey, you need to do this declaration, because Corcoran didn't want to sign his name to it, so he had her do it as the custodian of records. She at least had the wherewithal to say, based upon the information that was told to me, it was Corcoran who told that to her, and it was obviously Corcoran who was lying. After this June of 2022 interaction between Bobb and Christina Bobb and the Department of Justice, the Department of Justice continues to work their sources within Mar-a-Lago. They get security camera footage within Mar-a-Lago. They are aware with a great degree of confidence that Donald Trump is still continuing to hide classified records, and that his legal team of Corcoran and Bobb are just straight up lying to the FBI. Another way of saying lying is committing perjury to the FBI, or another way of saying it is that Corcoran and Bobb appear to have been themselves committing obstruction of justice with the validly issued subpoena by the Department of Justice and with regards to the Department of Justice's investigation. So then, of course, a search warrant is executed at Mar-a-Lago. Search warrant is executed August 8th. The search warrant was signed by the magistrate judge on August 5th. And of course, they find tens of thousands of other records at Mar-a-Lago, completely contrary to what Evan Corcoran and Christina Bobb had told the Department of Justice, as well as over 100 classified records, again, including sensitive compartmented information. And they also found a lot of these, in addition to the 100 or so classified records, they found all these folders that have these classified markings on them. They have all these classified markings on them, and the contents of the folders themselves were empty. And so, look, Evan Corcoran's right in the heart of the obstruction of justice. So already we know the Department of Justice had previously met with Christina Bobb twice. They met with her twice because she had lied to them, and she faces criminal liability and exposure. And when we did the breaking news hits here on the MeidasTouch Network to discuss Christina Bobb meeting with the FBI, we said it's likely that she's going to point the finger at Evan Corcoran, because Corcoran was the one who told her, sign the declaration lying to the FBI to cover up for Donald Trump. She was the fall person, and she's, I guess, willing to be a fall person. I can't even say it's unwittingly. So that's why Evan Corcoran here is so vital, is so key to all of this. And I think Evan Corcoran faces legal exposure. Now, one of the things you may be asking is, well, he's a lawyer, so is there attorney-client privilege that would apply here? There may be, in certain circumstances, attorney-client privilege that apply with his communications with Donald Trump. To determine whether there is what's called a crime fraud exception to attorney-client privilege. Just remember, attorney-client privilege means that the communications that take place between a client and their lawyer are confidential, and the government's not allowed to get it. Private citizens aren't allowed to get at it unless the client, who's the holder of the privilege, waives the privilege. One of the ways you can waive the privilege is by talking about what you have these private discussions with your lawyer to the public. If you make these private conversations public, then you waive the privileges. Is one way. There are also exceptions to the privilege, and one of the exceptions to the privilege, and there's very few exceptions to the privilege, but one is the crime fraud exception. For example, you may recall that the federal district court judge, David Carter, in the John Eastman lawsuit, where Eastman was trying to stop the January 6th committee from getting his emails and his text messages relating to the January 6th insurrection. Judge David Carter found that although there was an attorney-client relationship between John Eastman and Donald Trump, the crime fraud exception applied to certain documents, certain emails, certain text messages. Therefore, those documents and emails would be turned over to the January 6th committee. And by the way, we've talked about those here. Those are quite incriminating. So here, with respect to Evan Corcoran, the same type of crime fraud exception analysis with Donald Trump would apply as it relates to their communications. And it's a two-step inquiry. Number one is, was there more likely than not a crime that's been committed? And here I think the answer is absolutely yes. Obstruction of justice, Espionage Act, concealment and mutilation. These are precisely the claims that were in the August 8th search warrant that was executed at Mar-a-Lago. And then the next inquiry is whether the communications at issue, whether it's oral communications or documents, emails, text messages, whatever, were those in furtherance of the criminal conduct. And if both factors are there, then that is information that is discoverable in criminal proceedings as well as civil proceedings. And so there's the crime fraud exception. But the Department of Justice doesn't even have to go there, because they could be asking Corcoran a lot of questions just about Corcoran's interactions with the Department of Justice, because there's nothing privileged about that. The only privileged communications would be the secret communications with Donald Trump, but Corcoran's communications with the public, Corcoran's communications with the Department of Justice, Corcoran's communications with the National Archives, attestations, documents, letters, anything like that Corcoran sent, Corcoran engaging in a search of Mar-a-Lago, that's not privileged. So they can say, well, you said there was a diligent search. Walk us through the search process that took place. Explain to us what led to that declaration being signed by Christina Bobb. All of that is ripe for being able to prove obstruction of justice. So again, Evan Corcoran, a very big witness that has been called by the Department of Justice. Oh, and I think one other thing that we've also learned as well, in addition to Corcoran, Alina Habba was also contacted late last year by the Department of Justice. It's unknown specifically what the request was by the Department of Justice for Alina Habba, but one of the things it's believed to be about is in the Letitia James, New York Attorney General civil lawsuit. It's taking place in New York right now, in connection with the discovery dispute there, where Donald Trump was held in contempt for not turning over records. Alina Habba signed a declaration saying that she conducted a search of Donald Trump's personal office in Mar-a-Lago and that there were no responsive documents to New York Attorney General Letitia James. So she searched an area, though, where these classified records were then found. So she technically would have seen the classified records. By the way, some of the records that are in there may have also been responsive to New York Attorney General Letitia James. So she likely lied and committed perjury to New York Attorney General Letitia James in that case, as well as also demonstrating Donald Trump's obstruction of justice in this case. That's just because Trump's got the worst lawyers ever. I mean, these people are the worst of the worst of the worst and dig an already criminal hole for him even deeper. But that's good for justice. Look, things are moving in the right directions. You've been following our MeidasTouch Network updates. If not, go look at them, because subpoenas are flying right now. Subpoenas are flying for Special Counsel Jack Smith. Grand jury testimony is heating up right now. This is usually what happens as you get closer to indictment. It's exactly what we've been telling you. We expect it to start happening in February on the MeidasTouch Network, which is the increased pace of the grand jury. I predicted here on the MeidasTouch Network that we would see indictments still sometime in the May time period. Others predicted earlier. That's not what the data suggested for me. But here we see an escalation of these subpoenas, and I think we're only going to see more and more and more of this in the coming weeks and in the coming months. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit the subscribe button. We're on our way to 1 million subscribers thanks to your incredible support. So please hit the subscribe button now. In addition to subscribing, check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. I think you will love the exclusive content we have on our MeidasTouch Patreon, but most importantly, it helps grow this independent media platform. So check it out, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas.
At MeidasTouch, we are unapologetically pro-democracy, and we demand justice and accountability. That's why we're spreading our message to Convict 45. That's right, gear up right now with your Convict 45 tees and pins at store.meidastouch.com. That's store.meidastouch.com.